Imagine stepping onto a volleyball court. You've won over 600 games. You've spent 26 years building an absolute dynasty.
Right. Picking up 3 Conference Coach of the Year awards along the way.
Exactly. You are, by every metric, just a total legend in your field.
Yeah, a junkie.
And then you agree to let a university communications department put a microphone on you during a standard practice.
Which, you probably think nothing of.
Right. You
Yeah.
think nothing of it. But when they hand you the audio tape, you discover this horrifying reality.
Oh, this is the best part.
Out of a 3-hour practice, you have been talking for 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Wow.
You haven't been coaching. You've just been broadcasting.
It is the ultimate unvarnished look at reality.
Yeah.
You think you're facilitating growth, but the tape proves you're really just dominating the airspace.
And that brutal collision, between how we see ourselves and how we actually operate, that is the exact mission of our deep dive today.
It's such a necessary collision, too.
Yeah, it really is. We're unpacking this fascinating document titled Day 163, The Examined Life, The Braid of a Life Well Lived. And whether you're prepping for a massive career pivot or navigating a difficult relationship or just intensely curious about what actually makes highly effective people tick, this document flips our usual problem-solving script completely upside down.
Yeah, it forces us to stop staring at the broken world out there and start diagnosing our own internal engines, so to speak.
Oh, she's uncomfortable.
Oh, incredibly uncomfortable. But Kevin Kelly frames this beautifully early on in the text. He argues that over the long term, the future is decided by optimists.
But we have to be very careful with that word, right? Because he isn't talking about toxic positivity.
Exactly. It's not the person sitting in a burning room saying, this is fine.
Right, ignoring the flames.
Far from it. Kelly defines an optimist as someone who is actively imagining how to improve our capacity to solve problems.
So it's a rigorous, almost muscular discipline?
Yes. You don't ignore the fire. You systematically build a better hose. And the foundational blueprint for building that capacity is mapped out here using the Japanese concept of ikigai.
Which, okay, we need to clarify immediately. Because if you spend any time on LinkedIn, you've probably seen ikigai presented as this neat, pastel-colored Venn diagram.
Oh, the 4 intersecting circles.
Yes, exactly. What you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. It's usually packaged as this, career optimization hack.
And we can leave that watered-down corporate version entirely behind today.
Please.
The document reclaims the original profound depth of ikigai. It presents it not as a career menu, but as a portrait of internal coherence.
I love that phrase, internal coherence.
Right. It describes living from the inside out. Visually, it asks you to imagine 4 distinct threads that aren't just layered on top of each other, but intricately braided together to form a life that can actually withstand immense pressure.
And the document implies we usually have this whole process backward. We try to solve external systemic problems before we've established any internal baseline whatsoever.
We want to fix the world before we've fixed our own feedback loop.
Which pulls us right back to Cecile Reynaud, the Florida State volleyball coach we mentioned, listening to her own voice for 3 hours.
Yeah, George Raveling analyzes her story and points out this devastating truth about leadership. Most leaders, managers, and frankly, parents have absolutely no idea what they sound like to the people around them.
That's terrifying to think about.
It is, because their feedback loop is entirely broken. It only runs in one direction, which is outward.
They project, they instruct, they correct.
But they never actually receive.
Okay, I have to push back a little here, just on behalf of anyone listening who feels their stomach tying in knots at this idea.
Fair enough.
Because listening to an unfiltered recording of your own voice dominating a room for hours sounds like absolute psychological torture.
It sounds awful.
Right, so if you're a leader, isn't there a danger that this kind of intense microscopic introspection just turns into paralyzing navel-gazing? At a certain point, the coach has to step onto the floor and actually coach the team.
Well, you're touching on the exact friction that breaks most people.
Yeah.
The terror of self-awareness. But notice what Reynaud actually does with the tape. She doesn't let it paralyze her. She uses it to dismantle her ego.
She actually acts on it.
Yes, she actively invited this brutal critique. She admitted that people tore her up a few times when she opened the floor. She essentially embraced the mindset of that Taylor Swift lyric, I'm the problem, it's me.
It takes a lot of guts to say that.
It does. And the capacity to arrive at that sentence, to look at the mess you've created and not crumble into self-pity, is the bedrock of real agency. Navel-gazing is looking inward and feeling sorry for yourself.
Okay, I see the difference.
Yeah, course correction is looking inward, seeing the flaw, and actually changing your behavior.
And doing that requires you to actually tolerate silence.
Right.
You have to be okay with not filling the void with your own voice.
Exactly.
The philosopher Seneca argues here that nothing is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a person's ability to stop right where they are and just pass some time in their own company.
Epictetus pushes that even further. He calls it a mandate. You don't just stumble into progress. You achieve it by treating yourself as the primary project every single day.
Treating yourself as the project.
Right. This examined pause, as they call it, is the only space where you can sharpen the actual instrument, meaning your own mind, through which you engage the rest of the world.
It totally changes how you view a blank spot on your calendar. I mean, even if you aren't a Stoic philosopher or a Hall of Fame coach, this applies directly to your Tuesday afternoon.
Absolutely.
Albert Einstein noted that the monotony of a quiet life actually stimulates the creative mind. So that examined pause isn't dead time. It's highly generative.
Yes.
It's the only place where the grease gets wiped off the lens, basically.
Which creates a terrifying new problem, by the way.
Exactly. Because once you do the hard work, once you endure the silence, clean your own lens, and figure out your internal baseline, you look up and realize the rest of the world's lenses are still completely filthy.
Yeah, they're covered in mud.
So how do you navigate a world where the authority figures telling you what to do lack the very self-awareness you just fought so hard to build?
Well, you have to develop a relentless filter.
Mm-hmm.
And the document explores this through a fantastic story from Tony Dungy about a kid named Nathan playing Little League Baseball.
Oh, this story is so good.
It really is. So Nathan's coach is teaching him to field ground balls in a way that is physically absurd.
Yeah.
He's telling him to put his feet and knees completely together, basically forming a wall.
Which anyone who has ever played a sport knows how unnatural that feels. You have no balance. You can't move laterally at all.
Right. And Nathan knows it feels wrong, so he goes home and asks his dad, Scott.
And Scott isn't just a casual fan, right?
No, he's a future Southeastern Conference college baseball coach. He knows the mechanics of the sport at an elite level, so he confirms to his son, unequivocally, that the Little League coach is teaching him garbage technique.
A lesser parent would march down to the field and scream at the volunteer coach. Or, I don't know, tell the kid to loudly rebel during practice.
Oh, for sure.
Uh,
But Scott gives Nathan a much more sophisticated strategy.
He tells Nathan to follow the coach's awkward method during practice.
Yeah.
You do it to show respect to the person volunteering their time. But when you come home to your own backyard, you practice the mechanics the right way.
Exactly. You put in the reps in secret. So when the actual game arrives, your muscle memory takes over and you perform beautifully.
It's an incredibly elegant solution because it bypasses cynicism entirely. The takeaway isn't that authority is always stupid and should be openly mocked.
No, it's about the quiet internal discipline of testing the wisdom you receive.
This maps so perfectly onto the modern workplace. I mean, think about being stuck at a corporate job where a middle manager insists you use some incredibly inefficient, outdated, legacy software process.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right, and the instinct is to argue and prove them wrong in front of everybody. But the Nathan strategy says, look, you do it their way during the 9 to 5 to keep the peace, you keep the friction low,
Right.
but you go home and you teach yourself the cutting-edge AI tools on your own time. You build the capacity in the dark.
Yes.
So when the high-stakes project suddenly drops or you go interview for the job you actually want, you don't just have a complaint about legacy software. You have a completely evolved skill set.
I love that analogy. You're describing the exact posture of the Bereans, a group highlighted in the biblical book of Acts.
Okay, tell me about them.
Well, when Paul and Silas showed up to teach them, the text notes, they didn't just blindly swallow the information. They searched the scriptures daily to verify if what they were hearing was actually true.
Mm-hmm.
And the operative word the text uses is eagerly.
That's a huge distinction. Because they weren't hostile skeptics trying to play a game of gotcha.
Exactly. Hostile skepticism is really just another form of ego.
Yeah.
Eager verification means you genuinely hope the truth is being spoken, but you respect yourself enough to do the homework to confirm it.
Because the alternative is becoming the person Mark Twain skewers in that famous, incredibly acid quote. He said, "No amount of evidence will ever persuade an idiot."
Ouch.
But it's true. A closed mind isn't empty. It's a mind that has prematurely decided it has nothing left to learn. It's the coach who talks for 2 hours and 45 minutes.
And that arrogance is highly predictable. which is why Sun Tzu's advice from The Art of War is woven in here. He says, pretend inferiority and encourage his arrogance.
Pretend inferiority.
Right. The most dangerous, powerful person in the room is never the one loudly broadcasting their credentials. It's the person who has quietly tested the knowledge, found the actual truth, and feels absolutely zero need to announce it to the room.
But practically speaking, weaponizing that kind of stealth competence requires an insane amount of emotional control.
It does.
I mean, if you're pretending inferiority, if you're fielding the ground balls the weird way just to appease the coach, you are actively choosing to let people underestimate you.
You are choosing the long game.
Yeah.
You are choosing to endure short-term indignity for long-term leverage.
Which introduces a massive psychological challenge. How do you outlast the loud idiots without losing your mind?
Well, you have to fundamentally rethink your relationship with power, which Robert Greene calls the surrender tactic.
I have to admit, when I first read the phrase surrender tactic in a document about building capacity and coherence, it felt completely backwards.
It sounds like giving up.
It does. Surrendering sounds like giving up your agency. Why would you ever willingly submit when you know you're right?
Because fighting a battle you cannot win today only drains the resources you need for tomorrow. When you aggressively fight back against an arrogant boss or a rigid system, you give them exactly what they crave. You give them friction and a target.
Right.
By surrendering, by yielding outwardly while maintaining your internal conviction, you completely remove their leverage. Greene points out that it gives you time to recover, time to let their power naturally decay, and frankly, time to quietly irritate them by denying them the fight they wanted.
It's absorbing the blow to your ego now so you survive to win the war later.
It is. But to prevent this from just becoming Machiavellian sociopathy, the document brings in Plato's ethical framework.
Important caveat.
Very important. Plato argues that he who does not desire power is fit to hold it. The person who employs the surrender tactic ethically isn't a supervillain secretly plotting to crush their enemies.
Right.
They have genuinely detached from the desperate need to dominate. That detachment is precisely what makes them trustworthy when the power dynamic eventually flips.
Okay, but this detachment concept is where the text really challenged me.
How so?
There's a quote from the Bhagavad Gita that pushes this to the absolute extreme. It says, "You have the right to work, but for the work's sake only. You have no right to the fruits of work."
Yeah, that's a heavy one.
It is. Because if you are listening to this on your commute right now, busting your absolute tail on a massive project because you desperately need a promotion to provide for your family, how on earth are you supposed to stay motivated if you completely sever your intense effort from the expectation of the reward? That sounds like a recipe for total apathy.
It really feels like an impossible contradiction.
Yeah.
I mean, you're supposed to care deeply enough to work fiercely, but care so little about the result that you don't demand the fruit.
Exactly.
But the text resolves this tension by pairing the Gita with the Spanish writer Miguel de Cervantes. Cervantes wrote, "Never stand begging for that which you have the power to earn."
See, but those sound like they are giving diametrically opposed advice. The Gita says you have no right to the reward, and Cervantes says you should go out and earn the reward so you don't have to beg for it.
Right, but they are actually two halves of a perfectly whole psychology.
Okay, walk me through that.
Think of it like applying for a massive life-changing job. Cervantes represents the physical reality. You have to tailor the resume, you have to do the grueling mock interviews, you show up early, you project competence, you leave absolutely nothing on the table. You earn the right to be in that room.
You do the work.
You do the work. But the Gita represents the internal reality. The exact second you walk out of that interview and hit the elevator button, you have to psychologically let it go.
Oh, wow.
Because if you tie your core identity and your emotional stability to whether that hiring manager calls you back, the waiting will destroy you. The hiring manager's decision is a fruit you cannot control.
That's true. They might hire the CEO's nephew.
Exactly. Or they might lose the budget for the role.
So you grind with ferocious intensity, but you refuse to let the outcome validate your worth.
Yes. Steve Maraboli grounds this in a very practical reality. He says, an inch of movement will bring you closer to your goals than a mile of intention.
I like that.
Strategic patience isn't sitting under a tree meditating, waiting for the universe to hand you a promotion. It is moving forward constantly, sweating for every inch, but possessing the internal armor to not be emotionally shattered if the reward doesn't arrive on your preferred timeline.
It's holding a phenomenal amount of tension. I mean, you have to ruthlessly critique yourself like Coach Reno. You have to quietly filter every piece of advice like Nathan. And you have to work relentlessly while completely detaching from the outcome.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. If the goal is to braid all these behaviors together into a coherent life, I don't know about you, but trying to maintain that level of discipline sounds exhausting. What happens when we inevitably drop a thread? What happens when we snap under the pressure and just profoundly mess up?
Well, that anxiety is exactly why the Ikigai map and this entire philosophy would collapse without its final component. You have to grant yourself and others the permission to be deeply flawed.
Which brings us to the most emotionally resonant story in the entire collection. Ryan Holiday shares this complex look at the comedian Pete Davidson.
Yeah, this part is really powerful.
Now, the public mythology of Pete Davidson is inextricably linked to his father, Scott, who was a New York City firefighter. Scott died a hero's death saving lives during the collapse of the Twin Towers on 9/11.
And for a kid, that is an unassailable myth to grow up with. Your dad is a literal superhero.
But myths are static. Human beings are messy.
Exactly.
As Pete grew older, he started learning the complex hidden truths about his father. He discovered his dad had a deeply troubled marriage. He learned his father had struggled significantly with drug use. The superhero had intense personal demons.
And for a lot of people, discovering that about their hero would breed profound cynicism. It would shatter the entire paradigm.
It would ruin them. But Pete managed to integrate it. He realized his dad was just a guy fighting massive internal battles, just like Pete himself was.
Yeah.
But Holiday points out the crucial lesson. Discovering these flaws didn't diminish his father's heroism, it actually magnified it. Because despite the drugs, despite the messiness of his personal life, his moral compass functioned perfectly when the stakes were highest.
He still ran into the burning building.
He still ran in.
Holiday uses that realization to completely dismantle the perfectionist trap we all fall into. It is incredibly easy to listen to all these concepts, rigorous self-knowledge, stealthy discernment, stoic patience, and think, if I can't execute these flawlessly, I'm a failure. If my mentor isn't perfect, they have nothing to teach me.
We hold everyone to such impossible standards.
We do.
Yeah.
But pull that thread all the way back to Nathan's Little League baseball coach.
Oh, the guy forcing the kids to field ground balls with their knees taped together?
Yes. His technique was objectively terrible.
Horrible.
He was failing as a mechanical instructor. But he was out there on a Tuesday night. He gave his time to his community. He cared about those kids. He was deeply flawed in his execution, but his presence was still intensely valuable.
And Nathan and his dad held space for both truths. They respected the man's flawed contribution while quietly correcting the physical technique. They didn't demand perfection before granting respect.
Ralph Waldo Emerson has this quiet, almost passing observation quoted in the text. He says, "Our best thoughts come from others."
That's beautiful.
It is. You cannot weave a coherent life in isolation. We desperately need the brutal, mutual critique modeled by Coach Reno's players. We need the nuanced guidance of people like Nathan's dad.
Yeah.
We need the messy, heroic humanity of Pete Davidson's father.
Which culminates in a brilliant observation from the legendary soccer player Pelé. He famously noted that success requires hard work, perseverance, and sacrifice.
The usual suspects.
Right. But he said above all of that, success requires love for what you are doing. Love precedes mastery.
Oh, I love that.
You don't have to be perfect to love the game. You don't have to have your ego completely dismantled to love the work. Love is entirely accessible to the wildly imperfect beginner.
It is the ultimate binding agent for this entire Ikigai framework. The historian Edward Tenner observed that sometimes things can go right only by first going very wrong. Look closely at the architecture of every single breakthrough we've explored today. Every single one required a profound failure first.
Yeah, I mean, Coach Reina had to be utterly humiliated by a tape recording of her own arrogance before she could learn to listen.
Right. Nathan had to physically stumble through the wrong mechanics before he could appreciate and master the correct ones.
Robert Greene's tactician has to endure the painful vulnerability of surrender before they can ever return from a position of strength.
And Pete Davidson had to grieve the loss of a pristine, fictional superhero before he could actually love his real, wonderfully complicated father.
Wow.
The coherent life isn't a checklist you optimize on a Sunday afternoon and execute flawlessly on Monday. It is a messy, chaotic braid of failure, rigorous reexamination, constant revision, and profound grace.
So as we pull all these threads together, what does this practically mean for you today? The document brings us back to one final piercing thought from George Raveling. After he finished analyzing Coach Rano's brutal self-assessment, he posed a question that is staggering in its simplicity.
It really is.
It takes 3 seconds to ask, but it might take a decade to answer honestly. He asks, would you want to play for you? It instantly cuts through all the noise, all the justifications, all the external blame. If the answer is yes, that is a beautiful thing. Guard it fiercely and understand the mechanics of why it's working.
Right.
But if the honest answer is not yet, don't let it crush you. That realization isn't a failure. It is simply the diagnostic phase. It is where the real work finally begins.
We've established from Pele that love must precede mastery, and from Holiday that we have to embrace our own deep, messy complications.
Absolutely.
So as you step back into your day, ask yourself this. What if the very first step to achieving that beautifully braided, highly effective life isn't grueling self-discipline at all? What if it isn't mastering strategic patience or perfectly analyzing your flaws?
Before you grab a wrench to forcefully torque the engine, before you download another productivity app to optimize your output, wait, what if the absolute starting line is simply figuring out how to deeply, genuinely love the messy, incredibly imperfect person you are right now, long before the mastery even begins?
That's the real question.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.